Hey friends, I have a full busy day of food prep in front of me, so I thought I would bring you along and show you how I am preparing not just for Thanksgiving Day, but also the days to follow. A friend and I were just laughing yesterday about how she said, okay, so you have a plan for Thursday. But what about Friday and Saturday? You take all this time to plan and prepare for Thanksgiving Day, and then you have to turn around and continue to cook for your family on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it made me think ahead, and I've come up with a plan. So let me take you into the kitchen. I wanted to show you these raspberries real quick. I cannot believe we are in the middle of November and these raspberries are still producing, and because it's been cooler, they're super sweet. All right, let's head into the kitchen. I grabbed everything I needed from the pantry and the refrigerator and piled it all on the island so that I could see everything at a glance and gather my recipes and then get started. So my goal for today is to make 2 hash brown casseroles, 2 lasagnas. I pulled this ricotta cheese out of the freezer and it is not defrosting as fast as I was hoping. I made this a couple weeks ago. And what else? Some homemade cranberry sauce, which is delicious. I will share that recipe with you, as well as a really big pineapple casserole. On big cooking days like this, I like to really think ahead. As I'm doing one thing, I think about what I'm going to do next. So I wanted to start by just browning this Italian sausage. I had 2 packages, I think they're like 12 ounces each, of mild Italian sausage that I wanted to go ahead and brown up in the skillet and set aside for when I get my sauce together to make the lasagna. Now, I did end up transferring all of this meat to the big skillet beside the little one. Also, I do recognize that my stovetop is filthy, but what is the point of brushing your teeth while you're still eating Oreos? I mean, I'm going to make a bigger mess, so I just decided I will clean the whole kitchen tonight when everything is finished. I put my small skillet on low heat with about a tablespoon or 2 of butter to melt, and I'm going to chop up this really big onion. I will probably end up using half of the onion for the hash brown casserole, and the other half I will add to my Italian sausage marinara for the lasagna. This onion was so strong. If you have a successful tip to not crying while you're cutting strong onions, please leave it in the comments below, because I was squinting my eyes almost completely closed as I chopped that entire onion. My eyes were watering and burning. It was terrible. Here you can see they are already starting to turn golden over that low heat with just a little bit of butter, and my Italian sausage is browned. I guess there looks like there was still a tiny bit of pink left, so I left it on the heat and just kept stirring it up, and then turn the heat off and let it sit there and cool to room temperature. Next, I needed to shred some cheese. So I needed about 4 cups of cheese, I believe, for the hash brown casserole, and I will include links to all of the recipes that I used in the description box. But fair warning, some of these things I combined a couple different recipes. For example, I used a very different pineapple casserole recipe this time. And I'm excited to try it out. It actually has some egg in it and also some cornstarch to thicken up your, the base of the casserole. So I'm excited about that, but I'm going to need cheese for the pineapple casserole as well as the hash brown casserole. I'm also curious to hear whether any of you have tried pineapple casserole before. I had never tried it until I married into a Southern family, and I was very skeptical until I tried it. And oh my word, it is amazing. You don't have to add the cheese. In fact, the new recipe that I'm trying did not include cheese. It kind of had a footnote at the end that said, try these variations. And one of them was adding some sharp cheddar. Well, you better believe I'm adding cheddar, because that's the way that I've always had it now that I've been eating it for years. And it is so good, and it goes so perfectly if you're having ham, which we are. We're having turkey and ham on Thursday. So the hash brown casserole recipe called for, I believe, Colby Jack cheese, which I never have. So I just decided to mix cheddar and mozzarella. checking on my onions, which smell amazing. I don't know what it is about onions sauteing in butter. It just produces the most wonderful smell. They are looking good. They're almost finished, and then I will let them cool a little bit before I add them to the hash brown casserole. So this large mixing bowl, it looks like it has shredded mozzarella in it, but those are actually shredded hash browns, and they are frozen. I do this every year. I make them with frozen hash browns. First, I need to melt 2 sticks of butter. And then I am adding a large family-sized can of cream of chicken soup. Now, you could make cream of chicken soup very easily from scratch using chicken bouillon and basically just kind of making a gravy almost. Homemade cream of whatever soups are actually very simple to make. But for days like this, I am choosing convenience over super clean ingredients, and I'm okay with that. I turned the heat off on those onions, and now I am mixing the hash browns with the cream of chicken soup really well before I add the cheese. This is about 4 cups. Keep in mind, I doubled this recipe, so when you see the link, just know that this was twice that. My family is serious about their Thanksgiving food, and they are serious about leftovers. But because we are such a large family, we have learned over the last couple of years in particular, as the kids have gotten a lot older and eat a lot more, that we don't have leftovers. We may be enough for all of us to have a little bit more one more time, but then it's gone, and it's just sad. So I am making a lot of side dishes, and I'm making them double or triple. And whether or not I bake all of them on Thanksgiving Day, I'm not entirely sure yet, because we're having Thanksgiving with my side of the family, and that's not as large as my husband's side of the family, which we will eat with on Friday and Saturday some. All right, so here I am thinking that the hash brown casserole is done. And I have enough for 2 big foil pans full, and I'm very happy about that. I'm spreading it around. I'm going to put foil on top and stick them in the fridge to go in the oven on Thursday. When I go to put them in the refrigerator, I see the sour cream, and it made me realize that I left an entire ingredient out, and a lot of it. So I had to dump both casseroles back in the bowl and add 4 cups of sour cream. One of my sons said, I mean, is it that big a deal? I'm like, 4 cups of sour cream? Yes, we would have definitely noticed if that was missing. So now they're finished and much creamier, and they actually fill the pans a little bit more. And I'm ready to put the foil back on and stick them in the fridge. That is definitely a downside to multitasking all day long. You have to really make sure you're not skipping any ingredients or important instructions. Now, I am the kind of cook that likes to clean as I go. I would be very overwhelmed if I waited until the end of this big cooking day to start cleaning up. Not to mention, I'm fairly a minimalist when it comes to kitchen gear and bowls and all kinds of stuff. So I really needed to wash this really big mixing bowl in order to continue all of this food prep. I guess it's kind of like how I'm doing my laundry now, putting it away as soon as I have one decent pile and then continuing to fold and put away. So I'm going to add the second half of that onion to the skillet with some more melted butter to get this going for the marinara sauce and the Italian sausage that I will use in the lasagna. In case you are wondering, we are not serving lasagna on Thanksgiving Day, but I am thinking ahead to Friday and Saturday. Both of our older boys who no longer live at home will be home over the weekend, and there are certain dishes that they request that I make when they're home because it tastes like home, and I love that. I love that my kids have lots of memories tied to certain dishes that I make, so I will gladly oblige and make lasagna and some homemade garlic bread that night. So we are going to have this lasagna. I'm making 2 of them on Friday night for dinner. This is homemade marinara sauce that I made just a few weeks ago. I think I canned maybe 14 quarts. I don't know. It might have been like 12 quarts and 10 pints. I don't know. There was a lot, and it was delicious. I actually made all of this marinara sauce from tomato paste. I had 2 whole cases of tomato paste in the pantry that needed to be used up, and I also still have lots of fresh herbs in my garden. So I used fresh oregano, fresh basil, and it made a really delicious marinara sauce that I then pressure canned. You can water bath can a lot of tomato products, but I don't bother with making sure I've got precise acid, whether it's lemon juice or vinegar or whatever. So I just take the safe route and pressure can it. And I added the Italian. Now that my sauce and onions are almost finished, it is time to shred more cheese. I have found the secret to really good lasagna, in my opinion, is a really good flavorful sauce, particularly with Italian sausage, in my opinion, and also lots of cheese. Like, you don't want your lasagna to be soupy saucy, Also, I use regular lasagna noodles and I do not boil them beforehand. I just put it all in. You do need to make sure you have enough sauce and that you cook it long enough to make your noodles nice and soft. But I feel like the fact that I am making it ahead of time and it's going to sit in the fridge for 3 days before I bake it will just give me a head start. I thought I was all ready to assemble my lasagnas. I go to put the homemade ricotta cheese in a bowl so I could kind of stir it up, and it's still completely frozen. So I moved on to something else while I waited for it to defrost. Now I am going to make this cranberry sauce, or actually I think the recipe says cranberry relish. This was a recipe passed on to me from an older lady that I have been friends with for years. She just told me about it last year, and I made a really big double batch of it, and it was so good. Now, we don't use this in place of canned cranberry sauce. I will just confess to you right now that my family loves ocean spray jellied cranberry sauce. It's okay. I'm not ashamed. It's so good. I don't know. There's just something about that jellied cranberry sauce with your plate of Thanksgiving food that is nostalgic. So we still purchase that every year. But this particular cranberry sauce recipe I use when I make baked brie, which I will be making on Saturday before we have our second big Thanksgiving feast with our oldest son. If by chance you are not familiar with baked brie, I buy the large wheel of brie at Sam's Club. I set it on crescent dough, but before I wrap the crescent dough around the cheese, I top it with probably 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of, you could use just about any sort of preserve or jam, but this cranberry relish, which has some super finely chopped walnuts in it, adds the perfect sweet and tart and crunch. It's amazing. And then you wrap the dough all the way around it, including over the top of this cranberry sauce, and you bake it until it's golden. The center gets gooey. Oh man, it's such a holiday dish in my house. Not a dish, but like an appetizer or just a treat. It's so good. Hey, what do you know? More cheese. I've moved on to the pineapple casserole, and although I am doubling this recipe, since this is a new recipe to me, and this particular one did not call for cheddar, I decided to only add 2 cups instead of doubling the cheddar as well. One thing I'm excited to taste in this new pineapple casserole recipe is that it calls for brown sugar instead of just regular white sugar, and I think the way that I make homemade brown sugar using molasses and just organic, unrefined cane sugar, I think it's going to add a richness to this pineapple casserole that we haven't quite had before. I'm excited to try it. So this is my finished product. Homemade brown sugar looks and tastes so amazing. It really does not compare to store-bought brown sugar. So I'm going to get this mixed in with the shredded cheddar, and then I'm going to add the pineapple. The recipe called for a total of 80 ounces of pineapple. Now, it was supposed to be 2 parts crushed pineapple and 2 parts either pineapple tidbits or pineapple chunks. I had 1 can of crushed pineapple and then 3 cans of pineapple tidbits, which totaled 80 ounces. So that's what I used. Another difference with this recipe is it called for 4 eggs. Of course, that's because I'm doubling it. The original recipe called for 2. And also, every pineapple recipe that I've ever tried has you reserve some of the pineapple juice when you're draining the cans, and sometimes you mix that in with your Ritz cracker crumbs at the end to put on a topping. But in this case, you mix half a cup of the pineapple juice with I think maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Of course, that helps thicken up the entire casserole as it bakes. Next, I'm adding half a tablespoon of vanilla extract to the eggs before I whisk them up. Now I'm going to thoroughly mix the egg and vanilla mixture in with the pineapple and cheese until it is well combined, and then I give my juice and cornstarch mixture one last little stir, and then I stir that in as well. Now, I will give you a fair warning. This ended up really soupy when I poured it into the casserole dish, and so before I put foil over the top and stuck it in the refrigerator, and I will top it with Ritz crackers on Thursday when I bake it, but I ended up using a little 1/4 cup measuring cup to spoon out probably at least a whole cup of juice off of that dish before I put the foil on. I was afraid it would just be really soupy. So now it is finally time to scrape all of this homemade ricotta out of the jar. And this is the first time, I believe, that I'm using homemade ricotta in lasagna. I would say that my homemade ricotta has more the texture of crumbled feta, so I'm anxious to see how it tastes. I'm pretty confident it's going to taste like regular ricotta, if not better, but the texture is definitely different. Store-bought ricotta is very creamy and spreadable, and this is very crumbly. So if you are familiar with cheese making and know what I can do differently to make my ricotta a bit creamier, let me know in the comments. I would love to do it a little differently next time, but I'll definitely let you know how this tastes. Due to the fact that I could not spread this on the noodles, I decided to go ahead and just sprinkle it in, basically like feta cheese. I put a good generous layer on top of the noodles, and then I generously spoon the marinara sauce, which already contains some of the caramelized onions, as well as the Italian sausage. So a good thick layer of this sauce. I wouldn't do quite as much sauce if it were soupier, but this sauce is nice and thick. And it will produce more juices as it bakes, which is what ends up softening your lasagna noodles while it's in the oven. I typically bake my lasagna around 375 to 400 degrees for at least an hour. A lot of times I will cover it with foil, just kind of propped up so it doesn't stick to your cheese, but I cover it for the first 30 to 40 minutes and then take the foil off at the end, 10 to 15 minutes left so that your cheese gets a bit golden on top. As I said earlier, I have really come to believe over the years and years of making lasagna from scratch, that the key to a really good, successful homemade lasagna is good sauce that is nice and thick and flavorful. I definitely prefer Italian sausage over ground beef or, say, breakfast sausage, and then also plenty of cheese. This particular time, I shredded mozzarella and a pretty generous amount of fresh Parmesan, and I just tossed it together. So as I spread shredded cheese on top of each sauce layer, that is a good mixture of mozzarella and Parmesan. Years ago, when my kids were much younger and less opinionated, I did a sneaky little challenge. For 1 week, I did not serve my family any meat, and I wanted to see how many days I could go before they would notice. I went 7 whole days without them noticing that I had not served them meat one time for dinner. And one of the things that I made that week was a veggie lasagna. I chopped up eggplant and zucchini and mushrooms really, really small so that it almost looked like ground meat. And I made a good thick sauce and piled on the cheese. They didn't even notice it was vegetarian lasagna. Believe me, they would have protested if they'd known. Now it is time to clean up. I've got a few errands to run, and I also need to think about what I'm making my family for supper tonight. I am thinking I am going to do homemade chicken noodle soup. I have rotisserie chicken in the freezer, and I can whip up some homemade egg noodles in about 30 minutes or so. I also took a gallon of milk out of the fridge and made a whole gallon of chocolate milk, which my kids are a huge fan of, and I figured that could be a treat after a simple night of soup for dinner. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I plan to film tomorrow's food prep as well, but I'm going to put this out on Wednesday, and I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving.